My name's Rob Ryder, speaking out of West Cornwall, and I'd like to do a short video today regarding the human condition. I'll probably call it Terrain Theory for the Mind, Stop Feeding the Demons. So be a little bit careful what I say with this being YouTube and censorship, but so 2011 I come across a book, The Science of Health and Healing by Trevor Gunn, medical biochemist, who was challenging germ theory. Again, I'll limit what I'm saying there. So if we say what I've been saying for many years, there's no good or bad bacteria. There's just bacteria. Some bacteria you will find have proliferated under certain what we call disease conditions. But whether what we call good or bad bacteria, they're just feeding off waste. So it's the waste that will dictate what kind of bacteria you get. And as they're feeding off waste, then they're actually cleansing you out. That's why I don't say there's good or bad bacteria, there's just bacteria. So I've been working with Dr. Patrick Quanton, who had an alternative view of this 20 years ago when he walked out of his profession, and we've been working on this understanding since 2014. I published a free ebook regarding this, which I'm going to put below. I won't say much about it, but I'll put the link below to the free ebook. And I'm going to put a link below to an article Patrick wrote regarding our relationship with the mosquito. So I'm coming across and going through this idea, and when Trevor wrote the book, I communicated with him, and because I lived in the Amazon, I was very aware regarding mosquito-borne diseases, should we say, mainly malaria, dengue. And Trevor just basically said, clean liver, clean blood, no disease, regarding mosquito-borne diseases. That's what we were particularly talking about. I thought that's interesting. That goes along with terrain theory. And then Patrick wrote an article regarding the mosquito. And it all comes down to universal balance. The universe seeks balance. Nature seeks a balance. It doesn't allow toxicity. Toxicity is all around us, and it's a part of nature, parts of decaying matter and processes, but it will be the idea that it gets broken down to come into new life, just no different than your composter in your garden. So I'm going to put the article to low because it kind of takes this terrain theory to the limit, stating that the mosquito is not the problem. Yeah, mosquitoes are found a lot in stagnant water. So you're 70% water, so they say. So if you've got malaria, you have to look at what is the quality of water in your body. So that's another thing to look at. So I'll put that link below. So the universe is always seeking balance. So that means there's an intelligence. The universe knows where it wants to be. Life is dynamic. It's completely changing every moment. Waste is a normal part of life. You put food in, it gets processed, and then it comes out the other end eventually. Otherwise, it will just be putrid and be toxic and poison you. I always say, think about two things that might change your view on health. Change immune system to cleansing and rebalancing system. Yeah, and that will give you a different view, especially as you're eating. You absorb the energies of the food, and then it has to get rid of it. Cleansing and rebalancing. And also state, if you're ill, not what's gone wrong with me, but what is my body trying to do, trying to achieve. So if the idea that the body never ever goes wrong, and yet you're ill, and you're in pain, and you're suffering, etc., don't think, what have I got? Think, what is my body trying to achieve? And you will find an intelligence. This is why I always recommend the book, The Science of Health and Healing by Trevor Gunn. So all waste has to be processed and rejuvenated. Otherwise, eventually, we'd have a universe full of waste. It would start on the planet and then spread out to the universe. And that's not what the universe wants. It wants life. It wants growth. So there's a universal balance. The planet is an entity in itself that knows its own balance. It's dynamic, it's changing. The weather, everything changes all the time, but the planet knows its own balance. And then this would come into the climate nonsense. Even if, big if, the climate was changing, you have to go with it, because the planet will sort out the balance, not us. There's always a balance in nature. If you get a proliferation of rabbits, then you'll get a proliferation of predators, and that will lower the rabbit population. And then the predator population might grow, but then the rabbit population will go down, and that will rebalance the predators. There's a balance. Nature has its balance all the time, and it's nature's balance, not our balance, what we think, which I'm going to go to in a minute. And organisms themselves, including humans, we want to create an environment that will produce food, because we need to eat. Yeah. So organisms are always on the lookout for food. Now, if you can manipulate your environment to create food, which is natural, so we have humans who farm, but you'll find animals in their way can farm as well. Some insects can. So an animal and an organism will try and, if it can, impact the environment, so that environment will produce more food. Yeah, and again, nature will balance that out. We know that the balance of our own gut flora. Yeah, there would be a natural balance there. So if we're looking at the physical body there, that's producing waste that needs to be balanced out. If we know the body knows its own balance, not our ego mind, now we're going to look at the human condition and the insanity of the planet and the human condition. So when I come across this in 2011, I started to think, because you have to go into psychology, why is the world like it is? Now, if hatred, anger, fear, and everything, these types of emotions are toxic emotions, people, that's an actual energy source. It's not just, it manifests as an energy source that goes out into the environment. Now, a moment of anger is perfectly natural. But when you're constantly angry, when you're constantly in a state of fear, when you're constantly in a state of hatred and these emotions, terror, then you're pushing that out into the environment. It's an energy that goes out. That isn't a balanced, healthy energy. So there has to be a universal mechanism to feed off that, to rebalance. Otherwise, we'd have an energy, eventually, a planet full of hatred. So we know we can't perceive virtually all of the universe. So there's layers and layers of the universe we can't even perceive. So this is just, I'm putting this out there. What if there were energies that we can't perceive, that actually their job is to feed off human toxic emotions and behavior? So fear, hatred, terror, etc. That would actually make sense, in that these entities are doing the universe a favor by clearing up our emotions and feeding off them. So that would be a job. And if these entities had a level of consciousness, then they would want, being an entity, to manipulate their environment to produce more food. So what if these global elite were like an intermediary, that these entities were using these global elite to manipulate human behavior and the human mind, because the human behavior, as we've done in other videos, comes out of the human mind, so that we create and experience fear, hatred, terror, etc. So that, I'm not saying this is true, but that would make sense. That would give an understanding of universal intelligence, in that our toxic emotions are going out into the universe. They need to be fed and processed and rebalanced. Otherwise, we'd have a universe full of hatred, and the universe doesn't want that, because it's not productive for life. So that would mean, as there is no good and bad bacteria, these entities aren't necessarily, what you would say, evil. The entities themselves, they're just organisms, entities that want food, and their food is human fear, hatred, etc. There's possibly not a judgment there, and these global elite have a connection to these entities where they've given them information to control humanity. So their part of the bargain is they create these emotions and they get put in these positions of power. That would make sense. I'm not saying it's true, but that would make sense. So when you go back to a physical infection and you know the bacteria are feeding off the waste, you don't need to attack the bacteria. That's allopathic thinking. You look at the terrain, you look at your own lifestyle, diet, toxins in the environment, etc., and you deal with the terrain. So you take away the food for the bacteria, and then they will either have to change form to accommodate the new environment, or they will just die off if they can't. Yeah? Every organism needs food. If you take away the food, they die. Simple as that. So the allopathic method is to attack. Yeah, the fight on cancer, the fight on this, the fight on that. All allopathic thinking is antihistamine, antibiotics, whatever, to fight the body intelligence, which does nothing, especially in what we call bacterial infections, to deal with the terrain. You deal with the terrain, you don't have the illness associated, not caused, associated with the feeding bacteria, because they'll have to morph into different forms to feed off the new environment, or they'll die. Simple as that. So there's no war that you need to go against bacteria, meaning there's no war we need to go into against these entities. If it's true that they're feeding off human emotions like hatred, fear, terror, etc., stop being afraid. Stop hating. Stop allowing yourself to be put in a state of terror via the news and the government. Me personally, if something happens that I'm not happy with, I swear once. An explosion of anger that lasts 2 seconds, I swear, and it's gone. And then I deal with it. Yeah, so my mortgage went up 130 quid. What am I going to do? I'm going to swear. Staying in that mindset, does that help me pay my mortgage? No. Right. So you swear, you process your anger and your emotions, you get it out there, and you deal with the situation in a calm way, which is practical, will actually help the situation. Unfortunately, a lot of people stay in the terror state because they watch the news and they believe what they're saying. Yeah. When the lockdown announced, which I'm not going to go into details of what I thought about it, but I went home, had a cup of tea, processed it, and then just got on with my life. Ignored everything, just got on with my life. So I didn't feed negative energies. So if part of humanity's problem is we're being manipulated to be fearful, hatred, terror, all these emotions, who decides your emotions? Not the people on the BBC, not the governments. You decide your emotions. So why is there a need to go to war? Allopathic thinking. Take control of your own emotions. Quite simple. Your emotions. Yeah? Your emotions. It's simple. Very, very simple. And this is a little thing I've thought about for a long time. So if you go back to the Garden of Eden, and then Adam and Eve became aware of their nakedness. So you could associate that with the expansion of consciousness. When human beings, if we're the vehicle for which creation is able to experience itself, because we've got a vastly expanded consciousness than the animals, and we're self-aware, then that you could possibly say is the birth of the ego. then we became aware of our condition. And that could be part of the evolutionary process, but we don't know how to deal with it. Now, what if you exchange the serpent with the ego? What if, I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying this is true, but it's an example that makes sense to me. What if the serpent was our own ego? Thinks it knows better. Yeah. The intelligence in nature, through our expansion of consciousness, created this ego mind, which has a purpose, which is to experience and to be self-aware and be conscious of the experiencing of the universe. But there's no real intelligence in there if it's not used right and if it's not put in its place. So we've separated from nature. This ego's come along. It thinks it knows better. And then, isn't it interesting that if we believe this is the ego, tempted Eve first, which is the feminine spiritual connection to creation, whereas the masculine man is more earthly. So I just find that interesting that Eve was tempted first. What if she was tempted by her own ego and the man followed suit? Then we've lost our spiritual connection. And so we live in an ego-driven world because the ego isn't in its place. I'm very, very, very aware of my own ego. And we've got one. You can't deny we have. It likes to be right. It likes to feel good about itself. We live in a very, very... I'm going to put a link below as well to a friend of mine, James, his latest video. And it's showing the perversion and sickness in this world. That perversion and sickness doesn't come from a spiritually connected, natural mindset. That comes from an ego mindset that is disconnected from natural balance. So again, this has nothing to do with the elites. This is our mindset. It's my mindset. I control it if I can become conscious, which is obviously why we wrote the book, A Conscious Humanity. So that would mean we have the terrain theory for the mind. So our minds are basically putrid and toxic, but our minds, the entities, are feeding off our toxic emotions, and the elite, for their power that they're given, their job, their part of the bargain, is to manipulate mankind to create these toxic energies. So if you break that down, the allopathic thinking would say we need to attack the elites. Well, you can't attack these entities because they're on another level. But you can stop feeding the entities. So that's the holistic, natural thinking. Then you're left with the elites. Well, again, the allopathic thinking, you attack and destroy the elites. But if you remember, they're a tiny, tiny percentage of what's going on. And they're manipulating us. So the solution would then be for us to take back control of our minds, expand our awareness, put the ego under control. And a good part of that is admitting when you're wrong. If you're wrong, you're wrong. End of story. Take that embarrassment, take that whatever. When you're wrong, you're wrong. Your ego doesn't want to be wrong. Put it in its place and remind it when it's wrong. Yeah, and then it'll get to know what it's there for. Yeah, which is part of, the physical part of experience this reality, building things, using logic, things like that. But it's not the boss. The way I'm putting forward terrain theory for the mind. Take control back of our minds. Stop attacking the system. There's nothing wrong. Yeah, you can use lawful force to defend yourself. But I'm not saying we need to go on the attack with the elites. Cut off the food. So take control of your own emotions. Then what have you got left? You've got this elite, which is a small percentage of people. If we're not feeding their higher powers with negative emotions, who are they? Nobody. A group of old men. That's it. Pathetic old men who are living in fear themselves. There are people in society who won't change the mindset, like police, a lot of medical doctors. They're completely either mind controlled or ego driven. But you don't need to. We need to get a percentage of society who have got the courage to become aware, the courage to admit they were wrong, and then pursue truth. And also take control of your emotions. Because we live in a very, very, very sick, perverse world. Very sick. And this sickness is becoming normal. But it's not. And all behavior is balanced behavior according to how you see the world. Your body in an illness responds, or in any situation, your body's responding to how you put the objective reality plus your perception of it. So your behavior in life is driven by how you see the world. So all behavior, even somebody who's having an absolute dramatic, so for example, somebody who's been involved in a trauma, they may become really, really susceptible. Say somebody's been a woman who's been abused by a man. And just the thought of even being alone with a man, or on the bus on alone in a man, or anything walking down the street with a man, could make them freak out. That is perfectly balanced behavior because of how they view their experience and their trauma. So all behavior is balanced depending on how we view the situation. So if we want peace and calm in our lives, we have to view how we view ourselves and how we view the world and get a more balanced, objective view. And the only way to do that is to detach a little bit from yourself, look at your own mindset, take control of your own emotions, and basically stop feeding the demons.